Hey, I'm Mike Cruz, the founder and CEO of Visible. As you scale your company, having the right guides at your side can make all of the difference. Each episode, we'll talk to fellow founders, investors, and experts. We'll dive into their zone of genius, as well as hear about their past mistakes to give you a better chance of success. This podcast is for founders by founders. This is The Founders Forward.
All right, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Today, I'm joined by Lolita Taub and Eric Bahn. We'll be getting into a podcast they just launched called The First Pitch. Disclaimer, this is our first dual guest podcast. I'm really excited to see how this format works, but we'll see if there's any kinks in getting this going, but I think it should be great. You guys say you were like Flavor Flav and Hype Man. I think I'm going to hype you up real quick myself. Some congratulations for both of you. So we'll start with Lolita. We actually talked to Lolita a while back. I think, time is a weird thing right now. I think it was May of 2020, talking about founders and first-time fundraising. Smashing success, great webinar. Since then, Lolita's launched the Community Fund, where she is one of the founders of that and the general partner. We'll get into that. And then I'm also joined by Eric Bahn. Eric is the co-founder and GP of the Hustle Fund. You might have recognized the name of the Hustle Fund because Elizabeth has been on a couple of our podcasts as well. Really excited to have Eric on today and really talk about the fundraising environment. And Eric, congrats to you as well, because Hustle Fund 2, I believe, was announced publicly late 2020. Is that right?
Officially not announced, but we'll have more to say about that a little bit later.
Okay.
But thank you for that.
Okay. Not announced, but soon. Lolita, the Community Fund is announced, though.
Yes, we've been around now for about going on 4 months, and it's been awesome. Okay,
awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Maybe just to start, we love talking about collabs at Visible, like people collabing with other brands or people or movements. How did this collab come together between you guys, like the Hustle Fund and the Community Fund, and under the context of, we'll talk about the First Pitches podcast.
Yeah, I can start, Lolita, if that's okay. So first of all, the podcast, just to clarify, is called First Pitches. You can check it out at firstpitches.com. The start of First Pitches actually began, I think, from insights that Lolita probably had but also I've kind of landed on from several years ago, that there's this really strange idol worship that happens in Silicon Valley. It started with like folks like Steve Jobs, and later with like Mark Zuckerberg, and maybe more modern equivalents of that, where you see a really polished view of founders that at their current state, it almost seems like manifest destiny. They're born to be great. They always had their shit together. They were overnight successes because it was meant to happen. But as we sort of peel back that layer more and more, we realized that actually on day one, when a lot of these founders started, before anyone knew about them, they were scared, vulnerable, kind of crappy at pitching, and all the things that we've experienced in starting these projects. So our team at Hustle Fund were really inspired in exploring this concept further, and thought that it would be a good medium to explore in a podcast. So as we were thinking about this podcast, we want to find a partner who completely understood, in our view, some of these values, talks about it very openly, and also has wonderful personality and expresses vulnerability first. And there's only one person that we want to work with. In fact, Lolita, you were the only person that we reached out to, and possibly we wouldn't have done this podcast without you. So enter Lolita as our collaborator, along with our producer Hung, whom we worked with for many years, and we put together this project in the summer of 2020. Lolita, do you have your side of the story to add to this?
It all started on Twitter, and we literally launched a year after Eric and I had our first DM on Twitter. And so I just got to say that I feel like that I need to write a book about how everything in my life is happening because of Twitter. But no, I mean, everything Eric said is why we created First Pitches. It's so important for us in the VC startup space to be real. And First Pitches is exactly that. We get real with people that are just the best founders out there, right? We have Aaron Levy, we have Arlen Hamilton, we have Elias Torres, Michelle Satlin, who you heard the first episode. And if you haven't, go to firstpitches.com and listen to it. It's really wonderful. And it's such a, when we sat down and we were planning on how is this going to evolve, how are we going to put it together, we were really thinking about the goals that we wanted to achieve. And one of those is, hey, everyone starts somewhere. Everyone is human. There's a piece of vulnerability and in that concept of we're always learning and improving. And let's explore it and let's sit with it and see what happens. And then have our founders in the extended founder and investor community make it more normal for you to just be like figuring it out. Because at the end of the day, nobody likes to talk about it, but everyone is just figuring it out. So I'm super excited to have done First Pitches season 1. And super excited to see all of the episodes roll out.
Okay, so it's a serialized show, I guess. How many episodes are in season 1? We just did ours too. So we kind of went into this saying, hey, we're going to do a season and see what happens. This is going to be season 2 here, primarily with talking to investors. And season 1 was founders. So I guess, questions, how many episodes and any plans for season 2 yet?
Yeah, we have 12 we recorded. And Eric, if you want to share some details on it.
Yeah, so we did this in a pretty interesting format. We have 6 guests for our season. And what we did was we did a recording with each guest and then immediately recorded a debrief episode with just Lolita, Hung, and myself, where we had a chance to share all the notes that we individually took, ask some more questions amongst ourselves on some of these learnings. And those sessions also were surprisingly satisfying and got quite vulnerable too, in terms of like bringing our own journeys into what we heard from the guests. So we decided that we wanted to try it in a season format. It just was a little bit easier for us to schedule a more compressed kind of timeline to put together these episodes. And also in the spirit of what we suggest to our own founders when we try to coach, it's a bit of a pilot, right? We wanted to do a trial balloon, expend a little bit of effort in a limited period of time, see how the market reacts. And then we'll decide, whether we want to continue with this format, likely in a seasoned, serialized manner as well.
How'd you get the domain? Was it just available and you bought it, or did you have to negotiate for it?
Yeah, it was just there. And the Twitter handle was just there. First Pitches.
I love it. I always love asking where people got their domains because it's always an interesting story typically.
This one's boring and we like that it was boring. It was just there and we were just awesome.
You're not having to lease it or pay for it or give equity. So there you go. I want to go back to Twitter for a second because I also feel like Twitter is a magical place. We've found a lot of our guests. Lolita, I think that's maybe where even I might have DM'd you originally. And we found a lot of guests, like Amanda Getz was on the podcast talking about her new company, House of Wise and CBD, and we got connected with her on Twitter. How do you guys think about Twitter, right? I mean, I know you're both very active and have an audience there. There's a lot of great that happens there. And there's a lot of hate that happens there. And I think you both handle it so gracefully, especially the hate part. So how do you view Twitter as a medium? Why is it important for you as an investor? This wasn't a question I sent over ahead of time. I just find it interesting because you guys talk about it.
Eric, I'm going to point to you because you have very strong feelings about Twitter, and I think everyone should hear them.
We actually had a great conversation about this yesterday too, Lolita, or on Monday. So I certainly want to hear your perspective, Eric. So, there's a Buddhist saying that I try to live by, which is when you bow to the mirror, the reflected image bows back. Meaning the way that you treat your environment is just going to be brought back to you in kind. So if I treat everyone like an insecure asshole, expect that kind of behavior back. But if I treat people with love and respect, I get rewarded by that as well. And I think the same goes with Twitter. So Twitter is a very easy format medium for people to troll you. It's pseudonymous. You can create a fake Twitter and I can just begin like ragging on Mike anytime. But that does happen on occasion. But what I find is that it also creates an interesting kind of filtering mechanism. So if what you're kind of bringing out to the world is a lot of love, it's overwhelmingly loving back. And there have been cases even in the past several months where well-known people were attacking me for a variety of ideas. But it was kind of amazing because it was the community that I was able to develop around me. And this wasn't necessarily like intentional, that came to my defense. Because they kind of understand the values that and a little bit more around the intent behind what I tried to tweet out, which is a lot of transparency, a lot of support, a lot of cheerleading for founders. But one of the big models and role models actually that I have that I look up to when I think about my own Twitter community I'm building is actually Lolita. So Lolita, I'd love to hear about how have you been developing your Twitter community? It sounds so much more intentional in strategy than what I've ever done.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I sit down and I'm like, this is how I'm gonna. No, I love what the Buddha's saying. Like, I'm just not that deep, Eric. But I thought that was beautiful, by the way. To me, Twitter, especially while we've all been under this COVID era and we're all at home, Twitter to me has been a way of creating and maintaining relationships and giving. I think community at the core of it is all about giving and taking. And when you're able to create these symbiotic relationships, I think you get such a beautiful life because you have these incredible folks in your life. And so to me, I mean, it starts getting into the realm of the community fund, for example, and the community-driven thesis, because I believe that a community gives to each other. And I think of myself as a member of this broader community, in particular of progressive venture capitalists who want to build in public, who want to share knowledge, who want to help not just the next generation of startup founders, but also the next wave of investors. And this is something that very much attracted me to Hustle Fun and Eric and Elizabeth, because they were doing it for a long time. And so I take also inspiration from what Eric and Elizabeth they do. So I think about it very intentionally in terms of, hey, I want to build community. And I think community can be defined in so many different ways. I believe communities live in different spaces and interact in different spaces. And for me, Twitter is a space where I actually do think of a place where I'm going to, it's like my water cooler. Yeah. And it's also where I go meet friends, my partners, literally the community fund. Another Twitter DM relationship started with Jesse Middleton, So it's such a powerful thing. I honor it and I try to give. I do believe in karma. So whatever you put out is what you're going to get back. So very much in line with what Eric is talking about. But there is a downside, and that is that there's people who can be critical of you. And I think there's two kinds. There's a kind that's critical that helps you elevate yourself, elevate your thinking. And then there's the kind that's toxic. And there's a kind that's dangerous too. And I've had both encounters where I had... or all three, I guess, and there are three in a way. From a safety perspective, I had a Twitter follower that became a stalker. And so I had to actually really be thoughtful about, they were calling my day job. They were just doing all sorts of things. It was really strange. And I was very concerned about, is this person going to show up at my door? Mm-hmm. Let me get a security system. Then there are people who can just be toxic. And I had, there's one particular relationship that I've had for some time in the space. And I've just been so triggered by everything that's going on. And it just was too much. Like this person was giving me anxiety. And so I just had to block them. And in fact, I put a posted tweet and I said, look, if you feel like you need to, it's okay to remove people from your life in real life or on Twitter, wherever it is, if it's going to give you a better sense of safety and just more positive vibes. The third one is really great when everyone's just like, I love you. It's awesome. Let's do stuff together. But there's these different elements that are just part of it. And to me, there's just more pros than cons in engaging and building on Twitter. And from what I've seen, you can just build things that are even bigger than you would have thought because you're putting yourself out there, because you're sharing your values, because people are going to gravitate towards you if you put yourself out there as you are authentically. And that's what's happened. And I hope more of that happens. And in fact, this year, my word is collaboration. So I hope I do more collabs.
Collabs are in. We've been saying that at Visible. Collabs are in. And yeah, I hope I have the confidence you guys do. I would love to be more authentic on Twitter and share more openly about what we're doing. It's just like, I don't have the skin for it. I take everything personal. I would like look at my mentions and probably cry at night. So I need to get better at that because I know there's a lot of advantages, but I don't have the thick skin you guys do.
No, it's not about thick skin though. But Mike, like wherever you are, it's perfect. But I will say that I do believe that it's a platform that can really amplify good and bad.
Yeah.
And you can't do anything great with some stuff, falling apart and some roadblocks, but it's just part of life.
Yeah, so fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to get back into pitches, first pitches. When I first heard the name, by the way, I thought it was a podcast. Because I didn't do any, or when I saw Matt, who's our producer, said, like, hey, we're going to do first pitches. And I was like, ooh, that sounds fun. I thought it was a podcast where founders were going to pitch you their ideas. So I wrote all of my startup ideas that I was going to pitch you guys on and have you tell me if you would invest or not on the spot.
I mean, we could do that at some point. That's a
Here
good
they
idea
are. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Oh, great. All right.
All right, here they are. And you're not going to hurt my feelings because there's a reason why these haven't been started. But I keep a doc of all of my ideas. These are some of my favorite ones that I've recently come up with. And by the way, like I said, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm going to give you the macro idea of like why this is a problem. And then I'm going to give you my solution for it. Everyone loves accountability. Everyone loves OKRs and how Google did them. The problem with OKRs is that you only look at them when you set them, and then at the end of the quarter when you realize you didn't hit any of them. So my idea is an OKRs Chrome extension where anytime you open a tab in Chrome, you see your OKRs and your progress towards them every single day, literally because you're opening probably hundreds of tabs a day. Will you invest?
No.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, my take is that, so I like OKRs. I think they actually are a really good best practice. But what it comes down to is that this sounds like a reminder application, just to be reminded of like what the OKRs are. So there are pretty good solutions already in place, Slack bots, superhuman reminders, Boomerang, where I think you can cycle that up. Our team actually does look at our OKRs every week through Slackbot.
Okay.
So I just think that's going to be hard to monetize a differentiated business off this.
Like I said, my feelings aren't hurt. Lolita, what's your take?
Why are you crying right now? I see some
I'm not crying. I'm not crying.
We can see it. The listeners can't see it, but Mike is crying now. For me, it's more of a same with Eric. It is something that's important, and if you're a good manager, you've got that stuff figured out. And my team looks at the OKRs every week, and if we need, we use some technology. But in fact, we on a weekly basis, we're looking at where are we with all these things and moving forward. And as Eric will tell you, even with the podcast, I'm like, what metrics are we going to use to track our success, and so we can make adjustments and figure it out.
That was literally 2 days ago where Lolita was beating that drum. Yeah.
What metrics are you tracking? We had this conversation as well for the podcast. For us, it's more brand building than listenership. I'd be curious, what are you guys thinking about?
Part of it is downloads. So are people listening? I'm definitely also really interested in the email list that we build because these are people that are going to be our community that if we do season 2 or whatever it is that we're doing, really want to gauge the interest and how helpful people are. From a numerical perspective. I'm also really curious to just keep an ear out for what people are saying. So I'm keeping track of responses and what people say they love about the show. And I think that it's really important with metrics to have your qualitative and in addition to your quantitative.
Love it. All right, next idea. Gambling specifically sports betting is becoming legal in more states. Why should MGM and all these big casinos make all of the money? Why not have a sports book that is funded by the crowd or your friends, so that even though while they're losing money, they might be making investment back on the sports book. So it's kind of fintech meets sports betting.
Pass. I actually sold into Native American tribes, and they're all about casinos. That's where they make money. I sold them tech solutions. And one of the things, this has been like regulation is the thing that inhibits some of the growth. And so unless you were like super awesome and know that there's going to be some regulation that's going to allow you to gamble like this and make it scalable, maybe from a business perspective, but based on regulations and things like that, it makes it very, very difficult. And you really got to know the ins and outs of gambling.
Yeah, I would pass too. It's not to say that this can't be a great business. I think a lot of money can be made potentially, especially if the regulatory stuff is starting to loosen. It's more that, at least at Hustle Fund, we don't invest in most vice categories, and we consider gambling to be a vice category. And just personally, like I've had family members and friends who've lost everything because of gambling addiction. And so creating more accessibility in that is just something I'm not personally interested in.
There we go. Next one. OffSites as a service. Now, I wrote this one pre-COVID because we're a remote first company. I actually think it's going to be even more important post-COVID.
Tell me more. What does it mean?
So OffSite as a service, a way, I don't know if this is fully verticalized or not, but a way for me to go in as a founder or leader of a team or whatever I'm trying to accomplish, because this could be even team-based, right? What am I trying to accomplish? Is it team building? Is it fun? Is it brainstorming? What's my budget? Where do my different people live? And we kind of have it turnkey for you everything. We've had to do this at Visible. Now we do 2 a year. Like our first one, to give you an idea, was in Copenhagen, and we did it in a hostel. So it's definitely evolved, but a way to run offsites as a service.
Eric, you want to go first on this one?
Yeah. So the way that I'm viewing the lens of all these questions that you're asking, or these pitches, is it venture backable? Like, would I put Hustle Fund money behind it? And for that, that's a pretty high threshold. From like our definition of a venture backable business is at whatever post money valuation we can insert our first check into, can we see 100x outcome? So if we invest at like $1 million valuation, can I get to 100x on outcome on acquisition? As a result, like the bar is almost everything I'm going to say no to. But like we say no on 99% of things every month. So no, but I think I'd actually heavily use this because we spend a lot of time on and pretty good amount of resources on offsites within our team, and it's actually much more mindshare than I'd like to admit. And I also do think that if you find the right kind of niche, it could be a pretty great services business. Like you can be making even like tens of millions of dollars possibly on this. So it could be a fabulous business. But if, as my friend now, Mike, like we're now best friends, is just, I would say like, I would rather bootstrap this. Yep. Maybe take a tiny bit of angel money, but no VC money.
Yeah, I would say the same. And I think it could make money. I think that I personally would want to even for an SMB, I would like to look under the hood because I want to better understand the economics of how much human power you'd be putting into it versus the balance of leveraging technology. But offsites tend to be a lot of human interaction, and that's always very difficult to scale. And so if you found this like to be your passion and you were okay with that SMB, that would be probably my guess of what it would turn into.
Last one. And this is actually great. I'm glad I did this because all of my questions stem from what we just learned. Sales tax as an API. So Visible is the point now we're doing multi-million dollars a year in revenue. And then I'm encountering for the first time the pain of sales tax, specifically states sales tax and nexus laws and everything else. The solutions are super expensive if they exist at all, or you pay $700 an hour to take care of it for you. More software coming online. We all know this. Sales tax as an API, so it can do that automatically.
I think the challenge with this one is, again, when you look at regulation and depending on where you're doing business, there may be different things that apply or processes. There was a startup I looked at when I was doing my MBA program, and they were trying to address sales tax at airports to find a loophole, actually, in buying luxury goods. That was kind of their starting point. And one of the things that they quickly learned was about, what are the regulatory implications of regions? And there might be in the US, federal or state, or even internationally, what has to happen? What are those complications? And so, again, I think you could probably figure it out for a region. And it's the same thing that makes law sometimes really difficult, or even insurance. Really difficult because there will be different things you need to submit for every state, or different things that you might have to look for and do in different areas. And that might make it very difficult to scale. But again, it could be a good business because it's a big problem.
You're starting to get closer to my heart, Mike, in terms of like the types of businesses that get me excited. So I think Lolita's concerns are really valid, but I'm going to say maybe on this one. And the reason why is I love these kinds of picks and shovels businesses, like unsexy companies that are intermediating value exchange between two parties that just generate lots and lots of money because so much value is being passed. So maybe in the sense that I don't really know the space very well. I'm actually a little bit surprised that sales tax reconciliation hasn't been solved by like POS systems or Stripe or whatever. Mm-hmm. I would think that they would be solved. So but I trust your judgment because I'm not like as close to, I guess, the metal to as a practitioner to understand this stuff. I probably should though, because we do have some services stuff that are cross state. So
yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Fingers crossed, Stripe does solve it. Like these are all problems I've had in one way of like running a business. So I just break these down. I've done a little bit of research, and at least for sales tax, like collecting or understanding the laws and collecting is just a pain, and Stripe doesn't do it for you yet.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, like businesses that abstract away those kinds of complexity for a fee, I'm a big fan of. So if there's some greenfield space there, potentially that could be one that I'm excited about.
Okay.
And if you're an expert in the area, for me, so much of this is like, if it's regulation specific, it's not just about the idea. It's also about what's your background.
Yeah. Do you think that's true? Because some counter examples, I guess, is I was talking to Jim McKelvey, who's one of the co-founders of Square. And when him and Jack started Square, they knew nothing about the payments industry. And I think like in same thing with Stripe, right? I don't think the Collison brothers knew much about, they weren't experts in that industry. Do you think you have to be an expert to start a business in a specific space?
I don't think that you have to be an expert to start a business in any space. But for me personally, as an investor, if I'm looking at a highly regulated space, I definitely want to make sure that someone on the team has that expertise. And if they don't personally know it, that someone on the team, whether if they're right at the beginning, that they have a close advisor or an investor or something that is going to provide that complementary, because you have to figure it out. And so if everybody's starting from scratch, then that differentiation or possibility of figuring things out sooner or faster, I think, is limited. But of course, like there's a lot of examples of founders that had no background and they still did awesome. So that definitely happens. For me, I personally do like to see that the founders are bringing to the table something that's going to enable the growth and success of a company. And sometimes it's industry, sometimes it's something different. Mm-hmm. But again, highly regulated industries, it's a little scary to be like, all right, I'll just invest and see what happens.
Yeah.
The path to hiring expertise, I think, will need to be there for us to have some evidence that you can fill that gap of your knowledge. In the case of Stripe, one of our investors, this guy named Dana Wagner, he was like one of their chief legal advisors for many years. And he was just an expert in these kinds of payment rails systems, and I think did an incredible job in making sure that all the infrastructure was set up properly. Some of the most exciting high alpha kind of founders to invest in, though, are certainly outsiders, as we've all kind of identified. One of our companies is a company called Boom Supersonic. They're building a supersonic commercial jet company. Okay. And Blake, the founder, does not have an aeronautics background. He's not an engineer of that kind. He was just really into airplanes, created a spreadsheet of his model, brought it to an MIT professor, and was like, I think it's possible to create a really fuel efficient supersonic jet. Do these numbers make sense? And then when the professor's like, holy shit, I think it does. That's when it started game on, where he could actually build the story moving forward. I will say this though. So at least in that case, it was not easy peasy for that outsider to make the case to raise money. And I think that that's sort of the harder path you take as an outsider building into an industry that you don't have those kinds of experiences. It's not obvious for a long time until it's completely obvious after the fact.
Yeah. So I think, I went through 5 pitches to you guys, and they were quick, right? Those are 10 seconds each. How much does a first impression matter for a founder with their pitch? It seems like it might be make or break, whether you're looking at a deck that you're getting, I'm sure you're seeing, hundreds, if not thousands of deals a month. How much does the first impression matter?
I mean, it depends. Is it a first impression through the deck and an email, or is it a first impression in a voice enabled pitch? Sure.
Let me pull on that a little bit. So I think both of you have kind of open applications, right, where any founder can apply for funding. So they're submitting their deck or their pitch. So let's use that as the lens, I guess. So you don't know them ahead of time. It's not through voice. It's them sending you something. Is that the right way to do it? And if so, how much does that first impression matter of what they actually do?
So for me, I keep in mind that, especially because I have worked with and have focused a lot on underestimated founders, different people come from different places. And so when I'm looking at decks, I try to be actually very empathetic and know that sometimes people's skill sets don't necessarily say you have a really great business, but you may not be really great at decks. That's okay. But if the core information is there and I could see some of the thought, in a storyline, actually, I think that's one of the most important things to me is I love it. I'm really impressed when a founder has a deck that reads almost like a children's book, enjoyable and short. And someone who's able to storytell is really great, but then you have to, in my mind, I'm balancing it out with, well, are they great storytellers, salespeople? Is that it? Or do they also have, if they're a technology company, the tech skills, and do they have that go-to-market sales strength to then scale? So I'm literally trying to pay attention to how are they good storytellers? Because you have to sell. Pitching is selling. So if you're not good at it, it's okay at the beginning. But if they're 5 years down the line and it's I don't understand what they're doing, because sometimes I read decks and I'm I don't know what this business is. And that in that case, the first impression does make a big impression. But if it's something in the spectrum, I try to be really empathetic and try to understand. And I'm looking for team. I'm looking for market. I'm looking for what are they doing that's going to give them that differentiation wedge. And for us at the community fund, is it community driven?
I have a lot of thoughts on this as well in terms of Hustle Fund's model for how we treat first impressions. So let me first start with a statement that I think is uncomfortable for me to say, but is actually the truth, is that I, Eric Bahn, am too racist and sexist to actually have an objective perspective on people if I actually see them in person before they just start to speak. And I think a lot of this is actually because I came from a very privileged upbringing. I grew up in a rich part of Michigan. I went to rich kids college. I worked at rich kids places afterward. And it was a really myopic view of the people who I was surrounded with over and over again. And I work with a therapist and I work with diversity coach and all these things to make sure that I can undo all of these biases that I've learned over time. So if I were tasked with the idea of I need to put $1 million upfront into a business at the pre-seed stage, and we're going to talk to these founders, and then we're just going to decide in these meetings. What feels safe in Silicon Valley today as an industry at whole is a really narrow grouping of men who went to Stanford University and worked at Google and Facebook. And disproportionately, a lot of money goes to those founders, right? So at our fund, though, so let's recognize that bias for a second. But how do we counteract that? So at our fund, we have a mantra, which is that great hustlers look like anyone and come from anywhere. And it turns out that in the evidence of our fund is as we invest into teams based on their ability to hustle. So we start with a small $25,000 check into a lot of teams, spread that out in a very diverse pool of founders, work with each team on growth projects for 4 to 8 weeks, usually related to sales or user acquisition. That's when we can get a much better sense of the team's ability to execute their hustle, the market. And then, for a subset of those that just hustle very well into good markets, we'll concentrate much more money. It turns out when you invest in that model, you get natural diversity. It becomes almost half women and 27% underrepresented groups and so forth. It just looks like the population of the United States. So we emphasize, I think, the pitch less in the beginning. If it looks interesting, we want to begin working with that team immediately, which for us is a huge counterbalance. So what are things that we do to try to counterbalance our own kind of first impressions problem? So whether a warm introduction or a cold introduction, we dump everyone into our ingestion form. Everyone has to start from an even playing field of going onto our website and filling out the application where you can get initially judged. So there isn't really a concept of a warm introduction or a cold introduction at that point. The second thing that we see is pitch decks are optional. You just need to make the cases to how are you thoughtfully thinking about team, problem, solution, market, and traction as it relates to your business. And if it feels pretty thoughtful, that's when a bunch of email follow-ups will happen where we try to get a sense of how your brain works. Finally, when we do the pitch, it's all done on the phone. We don't do video. And the reason why is if I see Mike and he's just overwhelmingly handsome and has a beautiful smile, that actually plays into this latent implicit biases that I'm trying to overcome. I'd rather it's not perfect. I can generally discern gender and all that thing, but there's something different when the ideas are just hitting your ears versus your eyes that allows us, I think, to be a little bit more objective about what we're listening to. Right. And that's actually where we can make our decisions, usually within 25 minutes, as to issuing a $25K check very quickly. So then we can begin the real work, which is collaborating with each other, because we're in some ways testing the founder through this project, but more critically, the founders are testing us, right? To see are we actually good partners as well? And that kind of level of checks and balances along the way, I think is allowing us to do our work and hopefully overcoming some of these institutional biases that we feel as VCs towards very certain small groupings of people who get disproportionate access to seed capital.
And I just have to vouch for Eric and say he is very thoughtful and mindful about his biases. And I know this because we've had a handful, I won't say a lot, but a handful of heart-to-hearts on this topic. And it's just difficult. And if we really want to address bias up front, you've got to roll up your sleeves and do it. And even me as a woman of color, I have to keep myself in check too. Because, it's human nature to be biased. It just is. And so it's really refreshing. And part of the reason why I was so excited and have been so excited to work with Eric, because he's about it, right? Let's take a look. Let's figure it out. I'd like to just add that I think it's more than just the first impression for us at the community fund. One thing is, so if there's interest from one partner in one investment partner or investor in our fund, part of our process is also really short because we write 50K checks. And so what we do is we find 2 investment partners that have conviction. And so so we're trying to also address some of those biases that we may have, as well as not just biases from a human perspective, but also from a business perspective, and hash out hey, how do we feel about this deal? And do we have that conviction? Because we're going to be part of their lives, part of their communities, and we want to make sure that it works both ways. I personally like to work with people that I want to have a relationship with for the next, several decades, if not the rest of my life. And so that's definitely something I personally think about. I think I've told Eric, one of my filters is, can I think of this person? I was talking to Jesse Middleton, my partner today, and I was saying, my filter is, can I think of myself being stuck in an elevator with this founder or whoever it is, and they fart. Am I okay with that? Or like, would I have like a serious issue with it? And I think if I can think of that and I'm okay with your stink, I'm going to be all right with you.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't smelled my farts yet.
That's true. That's true.
You may not be okay with it.
Eric, I'm curious because it sounds you might have some data. I want to go quickly just back to your point. How many, companies or maybe a percentage have you guys funded without a deck? Because you always hear about how important the deck is. Do you have any data around funding companies without one?
It's less than 10%. I mean, the vast majority of founders still produce a deck and actually think it is a worth. So at pre-seed, to some degree, like this is my Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of perspective on this. Like it's almost all BS because it's so speculative. It's just like, it's so early. Like we don't really know, but but on the other side of it, it's just like, how are you organizing ideas and just like understanding where your brain maps. Decks are a pretty decent medium for doing that because you're forced to be succinct, forced to use different kinds of mediums, not just text, but also visuals. And it's kind of nice to see like how someone's brain works. The caveat is a really good one that Lolita said, which is like, you can still be great at business, but horrible at making decks. So like just because, so visual bias is like another thing. It's just like, how nice is it? But so the vast majority of founders produce a deck, even at the very day one part of their journey. And I highly encourage that. But there are cases where they don't have it ready yet because it's so early. They just got a lot of momentum. They just started to build and start to sell and they just haven't had time. In those cases, we'll still consider them, of course. So here's one last thing I'll start to share, which is like increasingly I'm finding a new trend, which is people sending us Notion deal memos more so than decks. I'm a little bit mixed about like whether I like that still. It's cool because I can sort of copy and paste and use that for my deal memo, and I appreciate that work. But at the other hand, like I do still think that decks are a good practice for a lot of reasons. Lolita, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, we have a podcast called First Pitches. So we believe in the pitches. So I'll just say that. So to answer your question, Mike, all of the founders that we've funded so far have had decks. We don't make that a requirement though. And I will say that I like Notion decks. Or Notion pages with the information that you would have in decks. And what I really believe is, look, if a formal traditional deck works best for you, and that's going to show and express your business in the best way, do that. If it's a Notion page, I'm totally cool with it. I want people to feel comfortable and be successful in their pitches and successful in communicating. And communication actually is part of the reason why I tend to kind of like Notion a little bit better. But I want the Notion page to also have images because there's something about, can you succinctly put something together? Because you're going to have to probably pitch to your customers. I mean, not probably, you will. So I want to know that you can put something together that makes sense. But communication is so important. And again, it goes and ties back with storytelling. Can you communicate your ideas? Because even if you have the best idea and you're the smartest, if you're unable to communicate it, to sell your vision, to recruit a team, to sell your vision, to recruit partners, to sell a vision, to get investors, that's like a non-starter.
Bringing it back to first pitches and pitching, I think this is super helpful for maybe first-time founders that are listening. What is a pitch, right? Has Shark Tank done us a disservice in the sense that you kind of walk into this room and you ramble for 2 minutes about your business and then it's over? Like, is a pitch a conversation? Is it something more formal while I'm sitting in front of the room and going slide by slide? Like, what makes a great pitch and what does it really mean to you guys?
Yeah, to me, it's literally communicating the story of what you're going to build, and in particular, telling the vision of what you're trying to create. how much money there is out there to capture in that space in solving this problem, what you're actually building, why it is that your team is the right team to do this. And to me, it's also something that I see founders miss quite a bit is their roadmaps. It's not even traction. Like most people put something on traction, but the roadmaps, like how are you thinking about this in the medium term, long term? And I know it's highly speculative, especially when you're early on. But if I'm going to sign up to be on a journey, because that's how I think about it. If I'm going to sign up to be an investor and be on the journey with a founder, I want to kind of know where we're going. Have some idea of what the idea is. And if we need to pivot along the way, like that's cool. But that there's forethought in, hey, from a VC perspective, we need to make this grow very big, very fast. And I want to understand what your thought process is. So it's not just like, I need money for the next 12 months. I personally like to understand the roadmap of how the founders are thinking, not just from a business perspective, but from a product perspective as well.
So I've been with my wife for 18 years, and I proposed to her 13 years ago. And I remember the specific question that I asked her when I got down on one knee. It was, do you want to grow old with me? Right. And the reason why I share this is, especially when you're an early founder, whom you select to have in your life as an investor, employee, a co-founder, it's, as Lolita said, like a long journey. It's 7 to 10 years, probably, maybe 15 years before your IPO or your massive acquisition or something. That is a very substantial part of your life. And so I do a lot of the fundraising at our fund. And when I come into my own first pitch, I actually have that question in my mind quite a bit. It's like, do I want to grow old with this person? So part of it is for me, it's actually condensing like the first meeting, the date, and then the marriage in a much more compressed timeline of like, I want to just get a sense of sharing like what we're up to, what our values are, how we're different, all that stuff. But what I'm listening for is actually the funder's values too, right? Does this person seem to be a really good ally to me? And we say no to a lot of LPs, in the work that we do. And I think founders, now this is actually a very privileged statement, like sometimes you just have to take the money to survive. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that you got to do that sometimes, even if it's an asshole. But if you're in a position where like you have enough of a lead list, you have some semblance of choice, then the next bar is just like, can I select for people who have really good shared values? And so my whole take is to two things. One is sort of treating it as like a two-way interview and like really believing it, that like you are as much interviewing your investor as the investor is interviewing you. This part two is actually kind of a tactical thing is, at least for myself, I don't believe in actually pitching with a deck. I actually think that like, it feels like a much more even balance of power when I can just stare at Mike's face, see his like facial twitches and like understand, like, does he really care about this like really important value that I'm trying to express, but he just like looks totally bored. Those kinds of small kind of inherent cues and visual cues, nonverbal cues are something that I think that starts to express some level of truth to hopefully get you to comfort in asking that big question of like, now do you want to grow old with me and invest in me? So yeah, I'll stop there.
It's so
I want
true.
to grow old with you, Eric.
I do. I want to grow old with both of you guys.
You too, Mike.
We and I are like brother and sister at this point. So
we asked all of our founders the NPS score of their last lead investor, and if they would recommend them to another founder. So the data is going to be imperfect, obviously, but it was pretty surprising. It was really low. It was like lower than airlines, is what we found. So it matters, right? Like who you actually decide to hitch your wagon to. And, again, the data is not surprising and it's not 100% accurate, but the idea is like, it didn't come back with everyone giving it a 10. And so, picking out which investors you work with is.
We do have an NPS score with our founders every quarter. Right now, ours is sitting at 91. And then we publish our results on hustlefund.vc/founders.
That's such a humble brag.
It is not humble brag at all. It's me just straight up bragging, saying like, ha ha ha, we're amazing.
That's true. That's what I'm right.
That's so awesome, actually, Eric. I'd love to do that too. And we're just getting started. I'll pick your brain on that at some point on how do you It's just a survey because I think that's really important to get feedback as investors.
Like 137 out of 100.
What was that?
I was gonna say your score will be like immeasurable, right? It'll be like way well past the 100 score or whatever.
No, but I love this. I love this because I personally, anytime I talk to a founder, I actually send them a survey to ask like how they think I did when it's coaching sessions or things like that, because I want to continue to get better. And I think not just to have a score to share with people, but honestly, if you want to really add value, you need to listen to feedback as an investor and take it and run with it. And I think that's like that next level of investor, and that I know Eric, Elizabeth, and Cheyenne are. And it's something we need to do more of, because sometimes it ends up feeling like, well, the founders have to get all the feedback, and it's a two-way thing. I love what Eric said about, hey, it's a two-way interview. And if you do have the luxury of turning money down that doesn't make sense, then do that, because taking money from jerks is no fun. And I've had founders who have asked me, should I take money? And I said, look, I can't, from this person who has this particular history. And I have to say, look, you've got to do you and figure out where you're at and what makes sense. If you have the luxury of not taking money from someone that you will not want to ideally have many years with, maybe don't do it. But you have to be really conscious about, like, you got to do what you got to do. That's just it.
It's almost impossible to get someone off your cap table. So you got to do what you got to do. How are we doing on time? I think we got to wrap up here. We're coming on the hour. 2 more questions, I guess. I mean, I have so many questions. Maybe we need to do part 2 at some point. We talked about storytelling quite a bit, so I think I'll bubble this question up. When you guys are talking to a founder the first time and you're getting to know them, you talked about roadmap as well. And we talked about market sizing with all the ideas you shot down of mine. How do you guys think about market sizing, vision setting, storytelling? But then how do you counterbalance that with execution, maybe lack of focus, a mile wide and inch deep? Like, how should I, as a founder, think about kind of those 2 things, right? Because there's certainly a balance there. How do you see like the best founders balance the huge opportunity, but hey, we need to go do this one thing with a picks or an axe or a shovel right now?
Yeah, for me, I keep it pretty simple, and it's something that I talk to founders quite a bit. I say, look, because some founders, really, a lot of founders actually want to solve all the world's issues within their market in their first go. And I say, look, don't sell yourself short on your vision. Like, shoot for the moon. I want to hear how you're going to change this market. But when it comes to starting, focus, and establish that traction, so that you actually getting feedback from the market. Yes, this is working. This is going in the right direction or not. And then as you start seeing success and you see that it's going to help you scale, help you grow, or you're in a place of you can grow and expand what you're doing, I think that's the best way to do it. And so I love founders with big visions. You've got to do it. Like, you've got to think big. I'll go back to Michelle Satlin, our interview with her. And she's like, if you're going to do something, do it big. It's like not worth it otherwise. And I agree with that. I respect other opinions as well. But so I'd say big vision, but make sure you're realistic enough to focus on. That's why I love Tam Sam Som. Like, tell me, and the reason why I like to see it is not just because I want to see the numbers, but because I want to know what assumptions you've made and how you're looking at the market and how, if you need to pivot, where you're going to go. And then the next thing about that is some of it is very qualitative, right? Vision. But the quantitative part is it starts to show in the traction. Mm-hmm. And some founders are like, well, I haven't sold $1. And I'm like, well, I don't need $1. Traction can mean you did a survey with 200 people and you're starting there. But there needs to be some signal in the market that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah. Eric?
Really quick. I'll respond to like a part of that, which is my favorite question to ask founders is, what are you measuring right now and why? And usually a lot of interesting secondary questions come out or thoughts come out of that. It's just like, well, we're measuring this one key metric here. It's just like, why did you select that? Why is this the most important metric right now? How are you dashboarding it? How are you instrumenting it? How are your experiments actually pushing the value up or down? What's the next measure for the next phase of business? A lot of it is just I gain a lot of insight on prioritization, their view of the market, what it's going to take to build a big company, on how they select measurements. And it's also very easy for me to hold them accountable too, which is like, well, you said that like new installs is your big metric here, but you're talking about these activities that don't seem to address it. Like what's changed in the business? So that's sort of my favorite.
Full circle back to metrics, because it's true. So one thing, and Mike, we've talked about this. One thing I love from founders is they tell me they're going to do something that's associated with a metric that they've associated with success. And then they go do it and they keep me in the loop, and we are building a relationship, and they're doing what they said they were going to do. And that's like magic, because not everybody does what they say they're going to do or tracks to something. And that speaks volumes for me. Yeah.
Investors invest in lines and not dots, as we always tell people, right? And how do you help draw those connections? And you can't track apples one month and oranges the next. Should founders pay to pitch?
No.
Never.
Okay. Last question. What percent of pitches you see to come? What's the ratio of how many pitches or deals you see to the percent funded?
Roughly 2% for us.
Yeah, 1%. So we see 500 deals per month. We'll invest in 5 companies per month.
Yep. I think that's super important. Last thing I just want to echo to all the founders is that it's very much a process. There's a lot of no's. And so if you do that math and extrapolate it, and hey, if you think you're in the top decile or quartile, think about how many investors you need to talk to and build relationships with, because you're going to hear a lot of no's.
Well, just on that too, and for founders out there listening, it's possible too that you're the only person right, and everyone has no idea what they're talking about. I never got also a single investor say yes to my first company, but it worked out. So everyone else is an idiot except for you. And to resonate, like this is such an important point. Investors don't know it all, and we get it wrong a lot of the time. So if you get no's, it doesn't mean that your business is not good enough. It just means there's a difference in opinion or there's a different perspective. And so to that, I just say keep going and figure out what is the best path. And for a lot of founders, my advice would be also understand what kind of business you want to build. Sometimes founders really are excited about building SMBs, small, medium businesses. But because they hear you have to be a unicorn to be cool, they start going down that track. But neither is better or worse. They're just different. And understanding what capital you need in order to support your business is very key. And other than that, just we're here to help whenever we can.
There it is. Eric and Lolita, I can't thank you enough for coming on and joining the Founders Board podcast. There was so much there, a lot we didn't even get to, which is a shame, but hey, maybe we can chalk it up and do it another day. For all the founders, check out First Pitches, firstpitches.com. I already listened to the first episode. They're dropping weekly. You can sign up on their site and even get a chance to talk to Lolita and Eric herself about what's going on in your business. So check it out. I can't recommend it enough. And if you have the opportunity to work with them, like take their money, you heard about the NPS scores. Thanks for coming on, you guys. Any last thoughts?
See you on Twitter. I'm at Lolita Taub.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mike, for setting this up. Wonderful opportunity to speak to your audience. And Lolita, we'll be talking much more soon, right? We have a lot of First Pitches episodes to drop in the subsequent weeks.
I'm really excited about it. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on our debrief for the next episode. So, Mike, we want to hear your thoughts.
I'm excited.
It gets spicy.
All right. Thanks, everyone.